What if the lake you trusted remembered everything? One night, a girl disappeared, a mirror shattered, and a locket became the key to a secret no one should ever uncover. This is the story of Daniel and Emma, a timeless nightmare that waits beneath the water. The road to Silver Pine Lake was silent, too silent. Daniel drove through the thick mist that wrapped around the trees like ghostly fingers. His phone had lost signal miles ago, and the GPS stopped updating long before he reached the narrow dirt road. The cabin appeared suddenly, half hidden by fog and tall pine trees. A single light flickered from the porch, as if it had been waiting for him. He parked, stepped out, and felt the chill immediately, the kind of cold that didn't just touch your skin, it lingered. The air smelled of wet wood and still water. Somewhere in the distance, a loon cried, long, low, and mournful. Daniel stood there for a moment, listening. Then he heard it, faint, almost like the wind, a whisper. Daniel, he froze. His name, but no one was there. Just the mist drifting between the trees and the endless dark lake beyond. He shook it off. Maybe the long drive was playing tricks on him. Inside, the cabin was old but tidy. A fireplace, bookshelves, and a large window facing the lake. Perfect for writing, he thought. He unpacked his laptop and notebooks, eager to finally start his new book. Something peaceful, something away from the city noise. As the night deepened, the fog thickened. The reflection of the moon on the lake shimmered like moving glass. Daniel opened his notebook to jot down a few ideas. But then he stopped. He could hear it again. The whisper. Closer now. Clearer. Daniel, come back. His heart started racing. He stood and stared out through the window. The lake was still, absolutely still. No ripes, no wind, just silence. And then, beneath the surface, he saw it. A faint movement, a shape, like someone standing just under the water, looking up. He blinked, and it was gone. But the water, it kept bubbling softly, as if something beneath had just taken a breath. Daniel slowly backed away from the window. He told himself it was nothing, just his imagination. But deep down he knew. The lake had whispered his name, and it wasn't done with him yet. The next morning, the fog had not lifted. It hung over the lake like a heavy blanket, muting every sound. No birds, no rustle, not even the wind. Daniel brewed coffee and sat by the window, watching the gray stillness outside. The night before still haunted him. He told himself he'd imagine the whisper, exhaustion, isolation, nothing more. But when he opened his notebook, his hand froze. There were words written across the page, words he didn't remember writing. Beneath the water, she waits. His stomach dropped. The handwriting was his, but uneven, rushed, as if someone had grabbed his hand in the dark. He slammed the notebook shut and stood up, his pulse racing. This is crazy, he muttered to himself. Just lack of sleep. To distract himself, he decided to explore the lake. Outside, the mist swirled low over the water, and the dock creaked softly with every step. The surface looked like glass, motionless, reflecting his shape like a mirror. Then he noticed something strange. Near the dock, the water was warmer than the air. He crouched down, dipping his fingers in. It almost felt alive. That's when he heard it again. Faint, soft, almost tender. Daniel, he jerked his head up. The sound came from the middle of the lake, but there was no one there. only ripples spreading outward, slow and deliberate, as if something beneath had just moved closer. He backed away from the dock, but before turning to leave, he saw something else, a shape beneath the water. It wasn't clear, just a pale blur, and long, flowing hair moving gently with the current. His breath caught. He stumbled backward, nearly tripping over a root. Back inside, Daniel slammed the door and pressed his back against it, breathing hard. He could still hear the water dripping from his fingers onto the floor. Then, from behind him, the faint sound of writing. He turned. His notebook was open. A new line had appeared. "Don't leave me again." Daniel stared, frozen. The ink was still wet. The cabin felt different that night. Colder, quieter. Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. Not anymore. The silence wasn't empty. It listened. He sat by the fireplace, notebook open in front of him. The pages fluttered slightly, though there was no wind. He hadn't touched the pen, yet new words began to appear, one slow, trembling letter at a time. "Can you hear me now?" Daniel's hand trembled as he reached toward the notebook. "Who are you?" he whispered aloud. The pen lifted just slightly and scratched across the page again. "You left me in the dark." His throat went dry. "What do you mean?" No answer, only the faint hum of the lake outside, the water slapping softly against the dock. He stood and walked to the window. The fog was thicker than ever, and the moon looked distorted, like it was sinking into the water. Then a faint reflection appeared in the glass beside his own. A woman's face, pale, wet hair clinging to her cheeks, eyes wide open, staring not at him but through him. Daniel stumbled back, knocking over the chair. The reflection vanished. He turned to the window, but the outside was empty, just the shifting fog. His breathing quickened. "I'm losing my mind," he whispered. But then, something new, a sound inside the walls. Not mice, not the wind. A heartbeat, slow, wet, rhythmic, like something alive was pulsing inside the cabin's wooden frame. The whisper followed, crawling across the room like smoke. "You promised." Daniel clutched his head, closing his eyes. "Stop! Stop it!" When he opened them again, the notebook on the table had flipped to a clean page. Fresh words were already forming. "If you remember me, come to the water." The heartbeat stopped. The room fell silent again. Only the sound of the lake remained, gentle, patient, waiting. The night was thick with fog. Daniel stood by the edge of the lake, the beam of his flashlight slicing through the mist like a blade. The cabin behind him looked small and distant, as if it didn't belong to this world anymore. He followed the voice's command. "Come to the water." The lake was still, too still. Not a single ripple broke the surface, though Daniel could feel a light breeze brushing against his face. He crouched down, shining the light over the dark water. For a moment, he saw nothing. Then, slowly, a shape began to form beneath the surface. At first, he thought it was his reflection. Same posture, same light in hand. But then the reflection smiled. Daniel froze. His own lips hadn't moved. The reflection's smile widened, impossibly wide, and its head tilted just slightly, like a predator studying its prey. Daniel stumbled back, the flashlight slipping from his hand and landing in the water. The beam flickered, twisting beneath the surface like a dying star. Then he heard it, That same whisper, but closer this time, as if it were breathing against his ear. "You left me there, Daniel." His heart dropped. That voice, it was familiar. Not ghostly, not demonic, human. Soft, trembling, and full of pain. "Who are you?" he shouted into the fog. No answer, just ripples spreading across the lake, slowly forming into words that reflected the moonlight. "Look deeper." Daniel stared. At first, he saw only his reflection again. Then another, right behind him, the water. A woman, long hair floating around her face like black silk, her mouth open as if she were screaming underwater. He spun around, nothing, just trees and silence. But when he turned back to the lake, she was closer. Her face pressed against the surface from below, pale, distorted, eyes open wide, bubbles escaping from her mouth. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. "Emma." The name escaped his lips before he could stop it. The woman's eyes moved. She heard him. The surface of the lake exploded. Water splashed across his face as something cold and heavy brushed against his leg. A hand. Daniel screamed, stumbling backward, slipping in the mud as the ripples consumed the reflection. And then silence again. Only his own ragged breathing and the faint echo of her voice in the fog. "You promised you'd never leave." Daniel didn't sleep that night. He sat in the cabin, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the empty fireplace until dawn. The words on the notebook burned in his mind. "You left me there." He couldn't ignore it anymore. The voice wasn't random. The name Emma. It had slipped from his mouth so naturally, like a memory he'd tried to bury long ago. As morning broke, he took the old box he had found earlier from under the bed, the one marked ER. He'd thought it belonged to the previous owner of the cabin. Now he wasn't so sure. Inside were photos, old and faded. A man and a woman smiling by the same lake, years younger, maybe 6, 7 years ago. The man was him, and the woman, Emma. His hands began to shake as he flipped through the photos. There they were, laughing, holding hands, building a small dock together. Then one picture caught his breath. Emma sitting at the edge of the water, her face turned away, her reflection perfectly mirrored below. On the back of the photo, a single word was written in her handwriting. "Forever." Daniel dropped the photo, trembling. Memories came flooding back. That night, the argument, the storm, and her scream. He saw flashes, Emma falling, the wooden boards cracking beneath her, his own hands reaching out, too late. She slipped into the lake, and he never found her again. Daniel buried his face in his hands. "Oh my God, Emma." He whispered the name like a prayer. The wind outside began to howl. The cabin creaked as if it were breathing again. Then from the hallway, a slow, steady dripping sound. Drip, drip, drip. He followed it, step by step, heart pounding in his chest. The sound led him to the bathroom door. He pushed it open. The sink was filled with water, though the tap was off. In the reflection of the mirror above it, Emma stood behind him. Her skin was pale blue, hair hanging wet over her shoulders, water dripping onto the floor. Her lips moved, but the sound came from inside Daniel's head. "You let me drown." Daniel turned around, but there was nothing there, just cold air and his own reflection staring back. He looked back into the mirror, and now his reflection was gone. Instead, Emma's face filled the glass. Her eyes were full of tears, or maybe water, and her hand pressed against the inside of the mirror, as if she were trapped behind it. Daniel raised his hand, trembling, pressing his palm against hers. The mirror was freezing cold, but he didn't pull away. "I didn't mean to," he whispered. "I tried to save you." A whisper echoed through the cabin, gentle, almost forgiving. "Then save me now." The mirror cracked, a sharp, violent sound. Daniel stumbled back as the glass began to shatter, piece by piece, and behind it, darkness. Deep, endless, like the bottom of a lake. The moment the mirror shattered, Daniel felt himself being pulled forward. A sudden wave of icy air rushed through the room, and then everything went black. When he opened his eyes, he was no longer in the cabin. He was underwater, but somehow he could breathe. All around him, the world was suspended, silent, weightless, and endless. Blue light shimmered from above, rippling across his skin. Old furniture from the cabin floated around him like ghosts. The table, the lamp, the box marked ER. He tried to swim upward, but the light seemed to drift farther away. Instead, a whisper reached him from below. "Daniel." He turned. Through the haze of murky water, he saw a figure, pale, graceful, moving slowly toward him. Emma. Her hair flowed like ink, her eyes open but empty. Her lips formed his name again. No sound, just bubbles escaping her mouth. He wanted to swim to her, but something held him back. The water grew thicker, heavier, like invisible hands pulling him down. "Emma!" he screamed, though no sound escaped his throat. "I'm sorry. I tried to save you." Her figure stopped, then tilted her head slightly, almost curious. For a moment, Daniel thought he saw something like a smile. Then she raised her hand and pointed downward. Below them, in the dark, something glimmered, a faint golden light. Daniel hesitated, then followed it. As he descended, he saw shapes emerging from the gloom, memories suspended like bubbles in the water. A child's laughter, a wedding ring, the sound of thunder, and Emma's scream. He reached the light. It was an old pocket watch, still ticking. The second hand moved backward. Inside its glass, instead of a reflection, he saw the image of Emma, standing on the shore, alive, calling for him. Then, everything began to shake. The water churned violently, pulling him deeper. Emma's voice echoed around him, not angry anymore, but pleading. "Bring me back, Daniel. Don't let me fade." He tried to reach her again, stretching his arm through the swirling dark, but his vision blurred. The watch slipped from his hand, falling into the abyss. The moment it vanished, he felt something grab his wrist, cold fingers. Emma's hand, her eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw warmth behind the sadness. She whispered something he could barely hear, just one word. "Remember." Then, a blinding flash. Daniel gasped, and he was back in the cabin, coughing up water, the floor soaked beneath him. The mirror was gone. Only a puddle remained, still rippling, as if something had just slipped beneath it. Daniel woke up in darkness. Rain was falling outside, a relentless downpour that pounded against the windows of the cabin. He was lying on the floor, drenched, his heartbeat echoing in his ears. The mirror was gone, but the puddle that had replaced it still shimmered faintly, like it was alive. Ripples moved across its surface, though there was no wind. no movement in the room. Daniel stood dizzy. His hands were shaking. He grabbed the old box with ER carved on it and stumbled out of the cabin into the storm. The night air hit him like ice. The lake glowed faintly under flashes of lightning, and for the first time, he saw it clearly. The surface wasn't smooth. There was a circle in the middle, a patch of water that seemed darker, deeper, like it was breathing. Every flash of lightning made it pulse. Once, twice, like a heartbeat. He felt it calling him, not in words, but in something older, heavier, a pull from the bottom of the lake. He walked toward it, each step sinking into the muddy shore. Rain soaked him to the bone, his breath short, his pulse racing. He whispered, almost to himself, "Emma, if you're still there, show me." The lake was silent. Then a faint sound drifted across the water. A woman's voice, distant, soft singing. It was the lullaby Emma used to hum before sleep, a tune he hadn't heard in years. Now it came from beneath the surface. Daniel fell to his knees at the edge of the lake. The song was clearer now, sad, echoing, and with every note, the water began to swirl. Circles forming, drawing him in. Lightning flashed again, and he saw her, a pale figure just below the surface, eyes closed, hair floating like seaweed. She looked peaceful, too peaceful. "Emma," he whispered. Her eyes snapped open. The water exploded upward, splashing over him as the storm roared. Daniel stumbled back, but then he saw it. A wooden plank rising from beneath the surface. Something old, something man-made. He waded into the freezing water, his flashlight trembling in his hand. The wood was soft, rotten, part of a dock, long sunken and forgotten. And below it, something glimmered. Metal. He reached down and pulled. A small chain came loose, attached to a locket. Inside was a photo of him and Emma, smiling by the same lake. Behind the photo, scratched into the metal, were two words. "Forgive me." Daniel froze. He hadn't written that. Emma had. The storm suddenly stopped. No wind, no sound. The lake was still, completely still. Then, a whisper right behind him. "I already have." Daniel turned. Emma stood there, pale, soaked, beautiful. But her eyes were not empty anymore. They were calm. She smiled, faintly, and touched his chest. Where her fingers met his skin, warmth spread through him, washing away the cold. Then her body began to fade, dissolving into mist, into light, into the water itself. The lake shimmered one last time, then went silent again. Daniel fell to his knees, clutching the locket, tears mixing with the rain. For the first time in years, the lake was quiet, and so was he. The storm was gone. The lake was still, silent, silver under the pale light of dawn. Daniel sat on the dock, soaked and shivering, the locket clutched tightly in his hand. For the first time in years, there were no whispers, no shadows, just peace. He looked at the water and whispered, "Rest now, Emma. You're free." Then he stood, turned back toward the cabin, and walked away. Every step felt lighter, as if a weight had finally lifted from his chest. Inside, he changed into dry clothes, made coffee, and sat by the window watching the fog rise from the lake. It almost felt normal, but as the hours passed, a strange feeling crept in. The house felt different. Not haunted, just not empty. He brushed it off, telling himself it was exhaustion. Still, every now and then he thought he heard movement upstairs. Floorboards creaking, soft, slow steps. By evening, the fog thickened again. Daniel poured himself another cup of coffee, but froze when he noticed something on the table. The locket. He was sure he'd left it by the dock. It was open now, and inside the photo had changed. It was no longer him and Emma. It was just Emma, smiling, standing in the doorway of the cabin. Daniel slowly turned his head toward the hallway. The door creaked open. A faint light flickered from the kitchen. He stood up, heart pounding. "Emma," he whispered. No answer. He stepped closer. The air grew cold, breath visible. When he reached the kitchen, everything was still, except the coffee mug on the counter. It was steaming. Someone had just made it. Then from behind him, a whisper, soft and close to his ear. "You said I'm free." Daniel froze. The voice was gentle, familiar but wrong. He turned slowly, and there she was, Emma, not pale, not drowned, alive, or it was something trying very hard to look alive. Her hair was dry now, her skin warm, but her eyes were deep and endless, reflecting the same dark water from the lake. She smiled softly. "You brought me back, Daniel." He couldn't speak. She stepped closer, touching his cheek. Her hand was warm, but left a wet print behind. "Now we could be together again." Daniel backed away, shaking his head. "No, I set you free." Her smile faded. The warmth vanished. The air turned cold again. "You can't set me free," she whispered. "You're the one who tied me here." The lights flickered. Every window in the cabin began to rattle. Outside, the lake started to ripple, though there was no wind. Emma's face twisted, sadness, anger, love, and grief all at once. "If I can't rest, neither can you." The mug shattered, the windows blew open, and the cabin filled with the sound of rushing water. Daniel screamed as the floor gave way beneath him, and then, once again, there was only darkness, and the sound of the lake, endless, whispering, calling. Daniel woke up to the sound of water lapping. He was lying on the muddy shore of the lake, rain still falling, cold seeping into his bones. The cabin was gone. The forest around him was silent, shrouded in mist. Only the lake remained, still dark, endless. He tried to stand. His legs felt heavy, as though the mud itself was holding him down. A whisper reached his ears, soft, distant, yet unmistakable. "Daniel." He turned toward the water. At first, he saw nothing. Then, the surface shimmered. Ripples spread, forming shapes. Familiar shapes. Emma, the dock, the broken mirror. Memories he had buried, floating on the surface like wreckage. A hand reached up from the water. Daniel froze. It was Emma's hand, pale, dripping, reaching for him. The water began to churn violently, pulling at his feet. He tried to step back, but the mud had him. The hand reached again, this time grasping his ankle. "Come, Daniel," she whispered, voice both gentle and commanding. He struggled, yanking free, but another hand emerged, then another. The lake wasn't just water anymore. It was alive. It was hungry. It was every memory, every regret, every pain he had felt. And now it wanted him too. Daniel screamed, thrashing against the pull, but the lake was relentless. His arms, his legs, dragging him down. Above the water, the sky began to twist, clouds swirling, lightning cracking, though no storm had been predicted. You left me, the voices chorused, echoing through the water and air. Now you'll stay. You try to reach the shore, but the lake had expanded, stretching impossibly wide, swallowing trees, rocks, and land. Every foot he moved, the water pulled him deeper. And then, at the very edge of his vision, Emma's face appeared, smiling, serene, yet impossible. "Forever," she whispered. The last thing Daniel saw before the lake consumed him entirely was his reflection, twisted, terrified, drowning in water and memories. Then silence. The lake went still, the forest quiet. No trace of Daniel remained. Only the locket floated gently on the surface, reflecting the first light of dawn. The morning sun struggled to pierce the dense fog over the lake. Everything seemed calm, quiet, deceptively peaceful. Daniel was gone. Only the locket floated on the water, glinting faintly in the soft dawn light. He had vanished into the lake's grasp, leaving nothing but whispers behind. The locket opened slowly in the mist, as if guided by unseen hands. Inside, the photo had changed once more. Emma, standing at the edge of the lake, looking directly at the viewer, her eyes deep and knowing. The wind carried faint whispers. Not words, exactly. More like echoes of memory, sorrow, and warning. Forever. It wasn't just Emma now. It was the lake itself, alive, remembering, aware. It was the forest, the cabin, the mirror, and every shadow that had ever lingered. Every secret Daniel had tried to bury, now exposed, now part of the timeless waters. Locals spoke in hushed tones about the lake. On still days, they claimed ripples would appear without cause. Some said they saw a figure, always standing at the edge, silently watching. Some swore a faint voice would call their name when they passed by, gentle yet impossible to ignore. And at night, when the fog rolled in thick and heavy, whispers could be heard from the water. Daniel, Daniel.
No one knew if it was Emma, the lake, or some memory of both.
Some believed she had found peace. Others believed she was waiting, patient and eternal, a timeless presence that refused to fade. The locket, still floating, reflected the first rays of sunlight. The reflection shifted subtly, just a flicker, and for a moment, the water seemed to smile. The lake does not forgive. It does not forget. It only remembers. And in the shadows beneath the surface, something waited. Watching. Always watching. Or was it the thing in the shadows? Waiting, watching. Timeless. The lake doesn't forget. It doesn't forgive. It only remembers. If you enjoyed this story, like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next timeless nightmare. And tell us in the comments, would you dare visit the lake after dark?